Hello there. Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to ask a short favor. If you're interested in either of the two books that I have written and am about to release, head on over to my website at theanxioustruth.com/books. There you can learn about both books, one of which is free, and you can get on my mailing list to be notified when each book is released and how you can get it. I would really appreciate that. Okay, let's get rolling. Welcome back, dudes and dudettes. Welcome to episode 104 of The Anxious Truth. Today our topic is health anxiety, otherwise known as hypochondriasis, if you're into the whole psychological terminology thing. Today, though, we have a special guest. Actually, I had him last week. You're going to listen to a Zoom recording that I did last week with a professor from Norway by the name of Ingvard Wilhemsen. And Dr. Willhelmsen is a professor at the University of Bergen in Norway. He is a doctor, he is a lecturer, a writer, and a clinician specializing in the field of health anxiety, otherwise known as hypochondriasis. Dr. Wilhemsen was nice enough to spend about 30 minutes on Zoom with me last week. We recorded the call. We talked about health anxiety, what it's based on, what the underlying principles are. And we talked a lot about his particular approach and how he treats his patients who suffer from things like from health anxiety. Here's a spoiler alert. You're going to hear a tremendous amount of repetition of a lot of the concepts and the tools and the techniques that we've talked about in the podcast for the last 5 years. So if you have been following along with me, none of this will be new to you, but it will be a really good reinforcement and I think a more in-depth discussion of how some of the concepts that I talk about all the time relate specifically to the problem of health anxiety, being obsessed with one's health and being worried about bad things happening from a health standpoint. So let's get rolling. I want to get into the interview. This is what you're going to hear. This was recorded last week over Zoom. Quality is pretty good. So, just stick with me. I did the best we could, given the fact that we're on opposite sides of the world. But before we start, I want to give a quick shout out to my friend Ingvard. Ingvard is one of the admins in my Facebook group. And again, if you're not in the Facebook group, please take a moment, theanxioustruth.com/links. You'll see a link to the Facebook group. Please ask to join and get in. It's an amazing group of people, but Ingvard is one of the admins. I love her to death. And she took the time to not only alert me to Dr. Willhemsen's work, which is outstanding, but she took the time and did the legwork to get the two of us together. So thank you, Ingvard. I do appreciate it. And let's get rolling. I think you guys are going to enjoy this. And listen at the end. I'll have a little follow-up on how you can ask questions that the doctor was kind enough to offer to answer. So let's get into the interview and then stay tuned at the end. I'll fill you in on how you can reach out and have some of your questions answered. Hope you enjoy. The special guest will be today all the way from Norway. You're in Bergen, doctor, I believe, correct? Mm-hmm. Ingvard Wilhemsen, I want to say it right,
Yes,
who is a professor at the University of Bergen in Norway and a doctor who specializes in hypochondriasis, or what we know as health anxiety more commonly. And Dr. Willhemsen has been nice enough to take time with us today to talk about health anxiety, since I am far from an expert on that. And so many of the podcast listeners suffer from raging health anxiety, and they will probably get a whole lot out of this conversation. So doctor, welcome. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
So let's talk for a second about my podcast is focuses primarily on, and first of all, I'd like to let everybody know that Dr. Willhemsen has an extensive background in cognitive therapy, right? And so we speak very similar language here. And most of my listeners have been focused on things like panic disorder and agoraphobia for the most part. But I do have a tremendous number of listeners that do suffer from health anxiety. And I would like to talk for a while, if we could, about the difference in the way we approach those things. Because I always try and tell people that when you're learning to overcome something like panic disorder or agoraphobia, it's about learning to do things. Whereas with health anxiety, it's about learning not to do things like that reassurance seeking and checking. So maybe we could talk about that. Tell us your approach to treating somebody who's dealing with hypochondria or health anxiety.
Yeah. So health anxiety, the project usually for a person with a health anxiety, excessive health anxiety, is some, of course, is natural or normal.
Right.
But it can be too much. The project is either not to be handicapped in any way. And if that's the problem, they try to be concerned about neurological diseases. multiple sclerosis, ALS, and things like that.
Mhm.
But usually, the project is not to die now, not unnecessarily. And then they focus on cancer, heart disease, things like that.
Right.
So, and this is a project they have all the time. They spend a lot of time on worrying, checking the body, maybe seeking health assurance, to go into doctors, all this. Whereas in panic attack, of course, you also, when you get your panic attack, you're very concerned about dying. I think I'm dying, I'm going crazy, I'm fainting, getting a heart attack. But it's not a project you have all the time. It's when you have your panic attack. You can be similar to a hypochondriac, but they have this all the time as a project.
Yes.
They might have panic attacks in between, but they also could have a low-grade anxiety all the time.
I have a fair number of listeners who will tell me that they almost never experience panic attacks.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah.
Fear of dying.
Yes, but they are stuck in that pattern you're talking about of seeking reassurance and checking and scanning and all the time.
Yeah, most of them.
Yeah.
Some don't dare even go to doctors because they don't want to have their doom. But most seek reassurance all the time.
Yes.
Which doesn't help.
No, there's never enough. I usually tell people like no amount of reassurance from any number of doctors will ever actually be enough for an irrational fear. Yeah.
That's the problem. Like if you worry about your heart and you go to a lot of electrocardiograms, all kinds of checkups, and you ask the doctor after the last one, which is normal, doctor, how long does it last, an electrocardiogram? How long can I be safe now? And the problem is not even a second.
Right.
So what I focus on usually quite early in our talks is how to deal with risk and uncertainty, which is also a problem nowadays for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But many hypochondriacs tell me now that now can people see how we have it all the time?
Oh, because of what's going on now. Yeah. I understand.
Yeah.
And it is that search for certainty where none exists in life, ever.
Never.
Yeah, never.
And the future, of course, is in principle uncontrollable. And in my opinion, all anxiety disorders, I see health anxiety mainly as an anxiety disorder.
Mm-hmm.
The principle is that people try to control things which are in principle uncontrollable. Like if you have social phobia, you're concerned what people think of you. The problem is you'll never know. Even if you did in-depth interviews, you'll never know.
Right.
You can find what you want to think about yourself. That's okay. But other people will never exactly know. Death is uncontrollable. Most things are uncontrollable. That's the problem. The only thing I feel is 100% controllable is our own attitudes and actions. How we relate to the past, to death, to uncertainty, that's up to us.
Yes, we can control our reactions.
Yeah,
and we can,
to the uncertainty.
And our actions, correct.
How to deal with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that is so, and I think you can relate to this based on some of the things that I've read about you and I've been told about you. Mm-hmm. When you tell someone that, not always a popular thing to tell somebody. Like, I'm not going to reassure you. I'm not going to indulge your fear. We're going to confront this head on. Sometimes they get really angry.
Because they can be angry or they can start thinking. Because most things are uncontrollable. Mm-hmm. And it's perfectly okay that you want to be in control. It's a question of control. That's perfectly okay. Most of us want to be in control. What I suggest is stick to factors that are controllable. Don't spend a lot of time and energy on things that are in principle uncontrollable. So that's the big question then. Are you willing to accept, for instance, that you're mortal?
Right.
And it's not to have a positive view of death. That's not the point. Just accept. You don't know how you're going to die and when.
Right.
I ask them, do you know how you're going to die and when? They have no clue. So how can you prevent, or how can you stop dying?
Right. No, we can't.
No, it's a big problem.
And I think one of the things that I've discovered, or it seems to be true, is that one of the hardest things for these people to do is to disengage from those checking safety and reassurance behaviors. It is terrifying for a person with raging health anxiety to stop Googling, to stop asking, to stop talking about how they feel. They feel so vulnerable when they do that.
Because I see anxiety as a good thing, actually. The reaction, the anxiety reaction. It's a friend when you're in need. To have your adrenaline going, the adrenaline.
Yeah.
It's a good thing if you're in danger.
Correct.
But it's not a good thing in the regular daily life. But so it's natural if your project is not to die now. It's natural to try. How do you not die? Well, you have to check your body. It's very logical, very natural to discover things going on in your body and take them before they go too far. Is often an argument. Right. I don't want to suddenly sit there and haven't been keeping track of what's going on. So it's logical. And like if you have a panic attack, people don't go crazy or start screaming and lie down or do all kinds of things. They do things that are logical in the relationship to how they interpret the situation. If you think I'm dying, what do? Get to the hospital as soon as possible.
Right.
If you get your panic attack in a market, in a Walmart or whatever, Walmart, what do? You don't start screaming. You go out.
Right.
You think there's more oxygen out there. So you do logical things, the way you interpret things. The problem is that you misinterpret bodily symptoms and the panic attack.
That's true. And so, but somebody who's dealing with health anxiety as opposed to the panic attack they're not concerned about immediate death necessarily. They're concerned about some sort of hidden slow death that is coming for them.
Yeah. So they have this all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So people ask me all the time, like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? And the only answer that I can really give them is you have to stop. You have to work on extinguishing those checking, reassurance, and safety behaviors to prove to yourself, have the experience of still remaining safe, even when not doing those things. And that's where I kind of stop, because they get really a little bit upset and they're like, but that's so hard. It's like, well, yes, it is hard, but this is what we have to do.
Yeah, I think that what could make it easier to follow your then advice, or what we will call it.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to be mortal, if you still think that if you're just eager enough, go to the doctor often enough, if you still have that hope that somehow you can detect something that's going to save your life, it's very hard to do what you suggest. Because it's like jumping from a plane without a parachute. So the first thing I think, if you're going to get rid of your health anxiety and normalize it within a normal limit, is to accept I'm mortal and I can't do anything about it. Because if you don't accept that, if you say I'm going to somehow manage not to die or postpone it or whatever,
right,
then you'll continue. So that's the first thing. And it's easier to work on your actions, your thoughts, your attitude towards rumination, checking and everything. It's easier to control that if your basis is, I'm willing to be mortal. I admit it. I don't like the thought. I'm very against death, but I accept it. That's the first homework assignment. Are you willing to be mortal? And if not, the rest is going to be very tough. You probably will continue.
Yeah. Which is, I think, what I find is that it's really difficult for these people to stop those safety behaviors, because I think what you just said, like, no, I can't give that up because it's protecting me against this thing I want to never happen, but it is going to happen one day.
It's true. So that's the first thing, and they don't have to answer right away. They can think about it until the next session. I give short-term therapy, but in the next session, you'll have to answer this question: are you willing to be mortal? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And if they are, most people, when they think about it, because they accept, they don't know. Because I ask them, if you're going to control death, do you know how you're going to die? They have no clue. So how can you do it? Well, then they start guessing. Yeah, what's your guess? It could be cancer. What's the chance you're going to get real cancer?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know. What is it? Around 30%. Now you're scaring me, doctor. Yeah. Well, 30% also, there's a high risk. What's the risk? What's the chance you're not going to get cancer?
70%.
Yeah, 70%. So that's also quite high. So, but the problem is, it's hard. If you don't know how you're going to die, you might easily focus on the wrong death procedure. It could be a heart attack. You could be shot. It's hard to guess what we're going to get. And I had a disease. Sometimes I use myself. When I was 34, now I'm 71. But when I was 35, I was paralyzed within 8 hours. It took 8 hours. Was completely paralyzed from up here and down.
Wow.
And a rare disease called transverse myelitis. Not Guillain-Barré or things like that. bad prognosis, but I can walk, I can't run. But I use it in the way that I ask my patients, because they're guessing what they're going to get. So I ask some of them, but you haven't worried about transverse myelitis? Never heard about it. Well, I understand that, but you don't have to hear about it to get it. That's not how it works. The point is, one guy told me, oh, do you think that's what I have? No, that's not the point.
Right.
The point is, it's hard to guess. If you ask me in 83, the year before I got it, Ingvard, what do you think your first disease will be? I do not think I'll say, probably transverse myelitis. It's very difficult, but you notice when you get it, no problem.
Yeah.
Most serious diseases, you get a real hint. So this is the first question, how to deal with the question of being mortal.
Right. And
the next one, so we go to the next one?
Yeah, sure. No, I'd like to hear it. Absolutely.
The next one is all these thoughts you get in your head, all the worrying. You can't prevent catastrophic thoughts from entering your mind. Actually, the thoughts can be quite normal. If you have children, it's not unnormal to worry about how they're going to develop and what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have, it's not even unnormal or unnatural to worry about dying or getting sick or whatever. And today, of course, most people think about it if they're going to get affected by the virus. The problem is usually a catastrophic thought, it as if, or imagine if, imagine if.
Right, what if?
So the answer is in the future. Imagine what can happen. The future is completely closed. We don't even know if it comes. So you cannot find that answer now. So the problem is not the question, the thought. Our head is full of thoughts, and we can't even stop them from coming. Because we can read, we can hear, we can notice things. The problem is not the thought, but it's how you deal with it. Because if you spend a lot of time worrying, checking, going to the doctors, trying to get an answer which is in the future, you'll never find it.
Right. So
that's the problem with the worrying and rumination. You try to get an answer that you'll never get.
Yeah.
But I tell them, why do you do it actually? Why do you spend so much time worrying, checking? And they have some arguments we have to usually go through. Some of them say, I want to be prepared for the worst. I don't want to be, suddenly you get your cancer, your heart attack, and you're not prepared. You haven't sort of practiced. They try to prepare themselves. And the idea is, if you have gone through all the thoughts and all the terrible things, you'll cope a bit better than if it comes suddenly, a big surprise, which is very questionable.
It is questionable.
Can you rehearse, for instance, something happening to your kids, something serious? If you rehearse for 20 years, will you say, okay, at least it was my theme. Good thing I rehearsed.
Yeah, good thing, right?
The problem is bad things are bad things, whatever you've practiced. And it's very easy to rehearse the wrong disaster.
Yeah, and I think in the end, I always talk about worry as being sort of the plan without a plan. Like we think and then we plan. So I think it's reasonable. We all take reasonable, sane precautions and we plan for good health. Okay. Everybody does that. But it's the understanding that you can't actually plan. It's no longer a plan. Now you're just thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and trying to find a plan that won't ever exist.
Yeah. Also, some people tell me, okay, Willhelmsen, but not to practice, not to be concerned about this now. I couldn't take it if it happened. You see how scared I am just thinking about it. I'm sure it'd be much worse if it happened, which is not true. The fact is, people generally deal much easier and better with real issues than imagined. Because real issues, you don't have a choice. You have to take it.
Right.
And the good thing about real issues, now you don't have to worry anymore. Now you know what you're going to get. You know the situation. You can start coping. You get flowers, you get treatment, you get whatever.
Right.
But people deal with real issues much easier, because if it's just an imagined issue, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. So you just stand there and ruminate. And they have to tell me, if you're going to take sorrows ahead of time, which ones are you going to take and why? And now this rehearsing things, usually they admit it doesn't work, but they have another argument usually. I don't dare not worry, because if I don't worry, anything can happen. Interesting. Cannot anything happen if you worry? How can your emotional life in any way influence what happens in your body or in the world?
Oh, boy.
And that's very tricky and hard to answer. It's very hard.
I have also found, first of all, it's impossible to answer that, because what you're making is a perfectly valid point. And I am with you 100% on that. And it's something I've talked about extensively. Uh-huh. I often find there is so much resistance to that, to the idea when I say a thought does not create, alter, predict, change, or otherwise change, influence reality or protect you from reality. Mm-hmm. And we are immersed so often, at least in the West, in the self-help culture on the internet, with the idea of manifesting, and you can think things into reality, and you think the way the world is going to be, that people have a hard time accepting that. Do you ever find resistance to that idea? Like, what do you mean? I can't think.
They can resist it, but is it true or not? Is the big question.
Yeah.
Because this is called magical thinking. Mm-hmm. You try to control things that are uncontrollable. Yeah. And I ask them sometimes, do you think that the problem with people who get real cancer is that they didn't worry enough? Is that their big problem? If they'd worried enough, they wouldn't get it? Mm. And very few people say, yes, I think so. Right. Of course, we'd have to tell them, people generally, to worry more, so you won't get this thing.
Yes.
So after reflecting on it, and of course, it's completely legal to worry.
Oh, sure.
But it's tiring, it's fatiguing. And I'm not telling people you have to change. They don't have to. So I just try to help them to reflect on, how do you spend your life? Is it really this you want to spend your life on, not dying, instead of focus on living?
Right.
Which is a very good project, and you can do something about it. So the question, and after they've been thinking about, are you willing to be mortal? You have to ask, or you have to answer in the next session, this question: how many sorrows are you going to take ahead of time of these you can't do anything about? Which ones are you going to take? Are you going to take a broad approach and be a generalist, like in general anxiety disorder? Or are you going to specialize on death, your children, whatever? That's up to them.
Yeah, outstanding.
It's the same principle.
Right, exactly. How I love that connection between like generalized anxiety and health anxiety. Yeah. Are you a broad warrior, the jack of all trades warrior, or are you very specific?
It's completely the same principle, though.
Yeah.
If you take one, you can just as well take nothing.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Let's talk for a few minutes, if we could. Before we started recording, you were telling me about this 10-year follow-up study that you got about to publish, or is being published. So you're treating people with dealing with health anxiety and hypochondria, and you followed 10 years down the road. What are you finding? Well,
we found that first at that time they got 16 sessions. Later it's been fewer.
Okay.
But they got 16 sessions, and after 1 year. After treatment, they around 65% were doing fine, and these were people who had health anxiety for a mean of 11 years, and had been through extensive follow-ups and treatments. They all had psychotherapy before, so they responded very well. And 10 years later, they're just as good as after 1 year.
You still found 65% roughly.
Yeah, they're now dealing with the uncertainty in a new way. And that's the trick, to cope with life in the way that life is.
Yeah.
Don't try to spend your life on all these uncontrollable factors.
Excellent. So I guess the logical question, because I know my listeners, they're going to say, what about the other 35%? What happened to them?
Yeah, and who knows?
And what would you do for them? Is it just you think maybe a retreatment, an extended period of treatment? How would you address those people?
If I want to talk to them again, maybe they are not motivated to do this tank. They don't want to give up their project, and they don't have to, because some people stick to their project. The fear of dying is so strong they don't want to lay that project aside. They just feel they don't dare.
Yeah.
Of course, they can. As I said, it's not illegal to be a hypochondriac. So feel free, do what you want.
Yeah.
You just help them again to reflect. So it could be motivation. It could be they have somebody scared them to death by dying young, or something happened. Their father died when he was 40. Now I'm 50 even. So it can be many arguments they have, but it's rare that you get 100% success. It's rare.
Which makes sense.
Just feel free, but they can always change.
Yeah.
And if they don't change now, you can do it whenever you want. But do you spend your life the way you want to? Do you live your life the way you want? That's the big question.
Yeah.
You spend your energy on issues you want to spend it on. And all this magical thinking, the moment they understand it, it's easier to accept that thoughts are just thoughts. Thoughts are events in your mind. And we have to differentiate, I tell them, or I suggest, differentiate between thoughts, which are events in your mind, and events in reality. And the interesting thing is, of course, events in reality. Mm-hmm. That's what we're concerned about. So thoughts are just thoughts, they come and go, but you can reinforce them by ruminating, worrying, checking. If you want to make them stronger and give them energy, you have to take them very seriously.
Yeah.
And ruminate, control things, and start to act on them, or try to get rid of them. That's also a very good way of getting them power.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me about that. I can't hear about it, can't read about it. Then you reinforce it. It's just a thought, just leave it. And sometimes I suggest you can treat your catastrophic thought like a neighbor you don't like. You cannot stop him from ringing your bell, but you don't have to open. And if you meet him in the grocery store next day, he might tell you, I tried to ring your bell last night. Yeah, no, I'm completely aware. You didn't open. It was a very conscious decision.
Yeah.
Then he might take the hint. But if you open the door, give him coffee, ice cream, cake, whatever, he'll come again.
Yeah. Yeah. I use the analogy of, the drunk guy in the bar, in the pub that's hitting on, you don't own the pub, so you can't kick him out, but you can turn your back, Yeah. So very similar. I love it. Yeah, so helpful. I usually try and keep it to about 30 minutes because people, they tend to drop off to that. So I so appreciate that you've taken the time today. If people wanted to find more of your work, where would they do that? Understanding that maybe some of it is in Norwegian, but still.
But they can. I think they have to just go on the internet
Translate.
And use my name.
Yes.
Which is Ingvard with a D.
Yeah.
You can.
I will link it. Yeah. I will.
So if they just go on the internet, they'll find. And they can even Google Translate or find something in English. I don't know. Most of it is Norwegian. Learn Norwegian.
I'm doing it.
I know.
I'm doing it. It's great. So I would highly recommend. It's worth the time to translate. I have taken the time to read some of Dr. Wilhemsen's work, and it's outstanding. So, and really germane to the topic of the podcast and people who follow along. So, Doctor, thank you so much. You'd be welcome here anytime. So,
okay.
I appreciate it. Have a great day. Okay, that was 25 minutes that I hope you will have found worth listening to. Again, I want to give my special thanks to Dr. Wilhemsen for coming on the podcast. I want to thank my friend Ingvild for putting the two of us together. And if you have listened and have questions that you would like to ask about health anxiety, about what you're struggling with, about how some of what you heard can apply to you, feel free to reach out. theanxioustruth.com/links will give you all of the ways that you can get to me on social media. Pick your favorite one, send me your question, ask a question, and Dr. Wilhemsen has been nice enough to offer a follow-up episode where we can talk about some other concept and also answer questions that people may have. So if you have questions, send them on in. I will get them together, and hopefully we'll take some time very soon to get Dr. Wilhemsen back on the podcast to answer them directly. I'm going to ask if you are listening on iTunes or someplace where you can rate and review the podcast. If you're enjoying it, get something out of it, give us a 5-star review. Give us a 5-star rating, review it, write a paragraph or two. It helps other people find the podcast too. So if you're getting something out of it, you'll help someone else get something out of it too. As always, I'm going to leave you with Afterglow by Ben Drake, one of my friends who has graciously let me use his music as the intro and outro. You can find him at facebook.com/Ben Drake Music. Hope you enjoy it. See you guys in the next episode.
You know you'll never get another chance. So go and live your life. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Push through the pressure like an atom bomb. You keep on dancing like it's your last song. Makes no difference if you're right or wrong. Now you're on your way. It's in the afterglow. It's in the lyrics of the songs we know. It's in these feelings that you never
show. Hey, what's up, guys? Drew here. In the 5 years that I've done the podcast, I've never had a sponsor. But now it's time for me to put in a little plug for the day job, the business that I own. And that business is managed WordPress hosting. So if you have a website and it runs WordPress, and you'd like WordPress hosting that makes WordPress faster, more secure, and way easier than you ever imagined it would be, then check out Helix. You can find us online at imhelix.com. That's IAMHELIX.com. We took a long time to build Helix. I'm super proud of it. It works spectacularly. We take really good care of our customers, and I promise we would take really good care of you too. So if you're in the market for WordPress hosting that will blow your mind, check out Helix. I would appreciate the consideration. I thank you for coming by and listening, and I'll see you the next time.